8th, 2023 edition of the Premarket Prep session. I'm your host, Adam Holland, stock options expert market strategist, and we're here to dive into the important news, notes, trade ideas, information, analysis necessary to maintain profitability or at least maintain viability in these crazy markets here. We've got plenty of new information, plenty of new news. Apple versus China it also escalates. I'm using the mic for the first time, or for the first time in a bit, so just let me know if you cannot hear me. Praise the Lord, because short trading weeks are the worst. Not a lot of volume, not a lot of conviction, but if you know how to play them, you don't have to worry about throwing or blowing up your account, which is obviously very, very important. It's the weeks like this that are the most important to make sure you know how to play. So that's what we are doing, wading through these waters. But I'm going to go ahead and get started because apparently there's a super high pollen count. I got a good workout in, got a good run in this morning, but I'm sneezing my butt off and sniffling and all that. So probably minimizing time on camera is best for me. But let's go ahead and dive into what we have going on today. And I'm guessing you guys can hear me. I don't see anybody yet telling me they can't hear me. So we're going to keep it rolling here. Got the mic nice and spicy. All right, so our top news, spheres of influence, a lot is riding on the G20 summit this year, especially with notable absences that include China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin. President Biden will have an opportunity to make fresh inroads with many countries in the group that account for more than 80% of global GDP and reestablish the U.S. as the undisputed leader of the international system. Ahead of the conference, Congress has been asked for permission to lend $21 billion to IMF trust funds, with the U.S. still enjoying its special position there at the World Bank in keeping its hold on the institutions. Now, in terms of the backdrop, the alternative to the G7, known as the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has been looking to expand its axis of power by recently inviting more nations to join the group. Countries being courted, such as Argentina and Saudi Arabia, and possibly Indonesia, are members of the G20 as well, setting up some interesting and unusual dynamics at this weekend's summit. So the BRICS are also hoping to get many middle to lower income countries on board for membership, offering an alternative to the dominant Western economic model that has powered the globe since the end of World War II. Now, Biden's biggest objective at the G20 will be to boost the funding and reach of the World Bank and other development banks as a counterweight to emerging economies that have sought lending from Beijing. China's Belt and Road Initiative uses state-backed money for infrastructure projects all over the globe, giving it a presence and leverage in many new countries that are now tied to Chinese debt. If any of you guys keep up with like pop culture stuff, you saw Akon talk about this in an interview about how China is giving out, a ton of money in Africa specifically. So the U.S. also plans to push for funding for new infrastructure projects and other partnerships after the BRICS declared their ultimate goal of, quote, advancing the agenda of the global South. Okay, awesome, cool. Everybody can hear me. Nice. Now, tug of war. The biggest fear for the U.S. is, should the BRICS be successful in creating a separate economic and financial system, the effects of sanctions will wane, with the dollar no longer controlling the majority of transactions in international trade. Diplomacy has been conducted at the highest levels in 2023 to extend American power, including Janet Yellen's 10-day trip to Africa and re-engagement with Saudi Arabia after promises to make the kingdom a pariah. Immediately following his departure from the G20, President Biden is also set to travel to non-aligned Vietnam, which is quickly turning into a manufacturing powerhouse for American goods and an alternative to China. Vietnam, India, right? That is where a lot of American companies are going to get their stuff produced, their products produced. Apple wasn't the only one. It's tons and tons and tons of countries that are leaving China. For Vietnam, China has, kind of developed a lot in certain areas and not as cheap anymore to get stuff produced. So that production moves elsewhere, right, to other developing countries. And that's what really is going on here. So, BRICS is kind of really the whole, it's really been a lot of fear mongering around BRICS because you can't have two Chinas, right? You have one China that is super weak. They're no longer reporting youth unemployment. They've got these ghost skyscrapers, right? They're real estate market is just collapsing, the Evergrande collapse, right? You've got, oh, sorry, my allergies are just, I'm going to shower right after this. Um, you've got, just all these struggles going on in China. But then you mentioned BRICS, and people are like, oh, BRICS is going to take us down. Like BRICS is going to be the undoing. You can't have both. So I feel like it's either China is weak or China is strong and they're leading BRICS, but like both narratives can't float. So I just feel like the BRICS fear is kind of overblown at this point, especially when the majority of transactions are still made in the dollar, like literally like 90% or something like that. So you can bring all these small countries together, but at the end of the day, they're going to end up needing America. So it's kind of where we're at with things, but it is interesting. It's like when you go to a party with someone that you obviously have beef with. That's like the G20 summit right now, because it's people who are like, it's like, hey, I know you're joining this rival gang. You've been talking to BRICS and all that, but as goes politics. So I'm sure it'll make for a nice, spicy visit for President Biden. Now, in terms of tech news, treading carefully, Apple is the latest pawn in the US-China cold economic war amid mounting fears that its Chinese business will be hit by a ban on iPhone use by government workers and homegrown competition. Apple lost nearly $200 billion in market cap since Beijing announced the ban, a move seen as retaliatory as the US government has banned the use of certain Chinese products by government agencies, including TikTok and Huawei. The ban comes just days ahead of the iPhone 15 launch. However, Wedbush thinks that the issue is way overblown, given the relatively small impact on the tech behemoth's sales. Another cause for concern is Huawei's new flagship smartphone, which Bank of America believes could help the Chinese firm regain market share and potentially pose downside risk to iPhone sales in the region, a view echoed by Seeking Alpha analyst Bill Maurer. And apparently they also expanded that regulation. So they they announced like a ban on iPhones for government use 2 nights ago, and then they announced more restrictions last night. So they are just hammering away at Apple literally night over night over night, right? So that's something that I think is really important to keep watch on. But like we laid out, it's not a huge issue in terms of like Apple's bottom line. And at the end of the day, when it comes to like new launches of hardware, Apple, like typically, if it does do anything, it can like move up higher in anticipation of the new hardware launch, but typically on the day of it drops. So just remember to keep that in mind as we approach that date. Now, consumer news, strike in sight. The United Auto Workers said an offer by General Motors fell far short of its demands as labor talks heated up with a strike deadline just 1 week away. UAW President Sean Fain called the offer insulting and did not back down from the union strike threat. GM's wage offer is slightly better than Ford's, which was rejected by the union, but it relied on lump sum payments instead of the annual pay hikes being demanded. The union is expected to make another offer in response to Ford's proposal, while Stellantis, ticker STLA, will make a counterproposal by the end of the week. Wedbush said this is a potential nightmare situation for GM and Ford, although investing group leader Envision Research believes the issue is only temporary. So we've got more strikes happening, right? More workers standing up for themselves, standing up for their rights, but ultimately affecting the bottom line. These auto companies especially get affected by these strikes. I don't know if you guys remember when we had the whole truckers like in Canada that were blocking up the streets, but that caused like millions and millions of dollars for these auto companies. So at least they're, at the negotiating table. We'll kind of see what happens from that. But if they do struggle, GM, Ford, you can start to see some material weakness in those tickers, moving forward. None happening right now, but you could start to see that manifest. And a lot of these, auto companies are already kind of struggling as well. You have GM down at that 32 level, which has been kind of strong weekly support for it over the course of the past few weeks. So, who knows, based off the fact that it's held this area, it might not be a bad spot for GM swings. They don't look the best right now, but it's just, if you get that 3 months out and you just hold those bad boys. So far, GM has spent some time kind of in the dumps, but it tends to bounce off of this 32 level. So, we'll see what ends up happening. I'm not saying to go out and to do that because, again, I like to bet on things that look strong, not things that look weak and could collapse at any point. You're like, oh, okay, well, it collapsed. It didn't look like that beforehand. No, this definitely looks like it could. So, it's one of those things where it's like, not super, super excited about it. But GM has bounced off of this 32 level a number of times beforehand. Let's see here. Okay, so in terms of economic news, more Fed speak. Federal Reserve officials are signaling that the central bank will likely maintain interest rates at its meeting this month, although they all agree that more needs to be done in the fight against inflation. Quote, the significantly lower inflation in recent months is encouraging, said Dallas Fed President Lori Logan, but warned that this may not be low enough. New York Fed President John Williams agreed, saying the Fed will closely watch data to assess whether policy is restrictive enough. While the headline inflation rate has been at 2.5% over the past couple of months, other measures that strip out volatile food and energy prices are still high. Other officials have also called for a patient, data-dependent approach, including Boston Fed Susan Collins and Fed Governor Christopher Waller. That's just laying the groundwork for the upcoming Fed meeting. And this is important to know because you want to know the expectations heading into that meeting. Therefore, it's expected that they keep rates what they already are heading into the meeting. So, the market will likely price that in. And that'll be important as we head into, new Fed dates and figuring out what's going on with the policy. So that makes our lives, kind of a bit easier in that regard of what we know they're likely to do. And there have been a ton of Fed speakers on the circuit this week. In terms of today's markets in Asia, Japan down 1.2%, Hong Kong closed, China down 0.2%, India up 0.5%. Literally need to take a mouth breath because I'm so congested. The pollen count is crazy this morning. I should run with glasses on. London down 0.1%, Paris flat, Frankfurt down 0.3%, the Dow down 0.1%, S&P down 0.1%, NASDAQ down 0.1%, crude oil up 0.5%, gold up 0.2%, Bitcoin up 0.4%. Let's see what else we got going on. What else is happening? Citi analyst believes Intel's foundry customer may be a whale. SEC investigating Ryan Cohen's Bed Bath stake sale. And then British American Tobacco, ticker BTI, inks deal for exit from Russia and Belarus. And then Hudson Pacific, ticker HPP, suspends dividend, blames Hollywood strike. These analysts see Disney conceding demand in charter spat. Boeing says 737 deliveries will be at the low end of yearly goal. What else is new? Boeing disappointing. Honda Motor Company, HMC, adopts Tesla's EV charging standard, of course. Carl Icahn says Illumina CEO has his full support. DocuSign rises as Q2 results in guidance top estimates. Fresh round of job cuts coming for Goldman Sachs underperformers. And then Bulls versus Bears seeking alpha analysts weigh in on S&P 500 outlook. So that will pretty much wrap us up for today. If you took advantage of the nice little layup that was given yesterday during this session, it went ahead and paid. DraftKings, right? We talked about that, getting above that 30.50. DraftKings got above that 30.50, and it's sitting at price target number one of 31.42. So if you tuned in here, free game, free money that was given out, right? And you utilize that for your own, financial gain. If you're sitting here like, hey, Adam, it's a short week, I ain't doing crap. That's fine too, right? Just because opportunity is there doesn't mean you have to take advantage of it. But just pointing out once again that, if you pay attention and you're there and you put yourself in the right environments, opportunity will find you. But you have to take the time and at least put forth the effort to put yourself in those environments, right? We had breakout at 30.50. DraftKings got it. Now we're sitting at PT number one of 31.42. Great day, right? Great opportunity. So without further ado, that'll wrap us up and take us out. I'm going to go literally try and quickly shower and get this pollen off of me. But let's dive into things. Make it another great day. Finish strong. Don't overtrade. Don't force anything, right? Let's wait for that full week next week and come back ready to execute. Everybody have a great and safe weekend, and I'll see you here on Monday for our next pre-market prep session. Peace.